Right, we shall begin to kick into things. This is a public workshop, so everybody knows. Thank you to Great South for coming along today to come and present to us on their half-yearly update. Very excited to have you in the room. Apologies to those people watching online, although now it looks like I'm the only one eating, so or me and Andy. There are a couple of us eating because we're trying to roll through the day. We've got quite a bit to chew through, and we've had a long council meeting, so excuse us while we eat, but we'll be able to listen. So when you're ready, take it away.
Good afternoon. Thank you very, very much for having us, and it's awesome to be here. One of the highlights of my job is to be able to come to council and talk to you guys, answer your questions, and just take you along on the journey that we are on behalf of the region and behalf of you. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Charmi Abesingha. I'm the CEO of Great South, and I see there are some new faces around the council table, and it's great to see you all. Congratulations on your appointment. Very exciting time for us, and in my personal view, Southland is going to see some great opportunities eventuate over the next 5 to 10 years. And you can also already see some of that activity happening, especially in Gore, but in Invercargill and in the Southland and the wider Southland district. So today I'm going to just go through a few slides about who we are and what we kind of do. I've got Steve Canny here, who will be presenting about his areas, and apologies from Bobby Brown and Mark Frood, but they have recorded their messages on their slides, so you will get an overall opportunity to see what we do across all of the different areas that we work in. So, to kick off, Great South. Sorry. Shall I just press this? Oh, thank you. Okay. Right. So, Great South, as a council-controlled organisation, is funded by our 4 councils within the area, 3 TAs, obviously, Invercargill, Southland, and yourselves, and we've got the regional council. We've also got 4 other shareholders, MLT, ILT, SIT, and the Chamber of Commerce. And Community Trust is another member organisation, but they give us money towards investigation and impetus activities. Our shareholders, this vision has been there for a few years, and we kind of still think that this is correct for us, that everything that we do has to wrap around this vision of even better lives through sustainable regional development. Our shareholders have endorsed that we continue to work through these 4 sort of pillars that we are in. Regional development leadership, which is regional strategies predominantly, and that's the area of work that Bobby Brown manages. She's the general manager there. Regional promotions, including tourism and events, and that's what Mark Frood oversees. Business support and diversification, and the Net Zero Southland proposition, and strategic projects, that's what Steve's area is. Under business support, we also have some contracts with government, with MB in particular for the Regional Business Partner Program. And we also have the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs contract with Southland District Council that also supports youth and development of workforce. So over the last year, we have our SOI, current SOI, has 39 KPIs. Out of the 39 KPIs, we're progressing really, really well. I think sort of a real high-level performance snapshot indicates that the key projects that we've undertaken have delivered well and landed well, and we're progressing towards completing all of our KPIs. I'll leave this presentation as well that can be circulated to councillors if they so wish. Standout outcomes, really. So in tourism and events, one of the KPIs that the events team has is to ensure that whatever events are on in our district are accessible to our communities. So we focus on having the information available in a single source, and that's on southlandnz.com, and we then concentrate on showcasing what's available to our key markets. So here we've got 91% of our tourism website traffic, comes from the Southland sort of area. Another key area for tourism is that we bring people here for trades, for leisure travel, for businesses, to support business events. So they come here, scout out our place, and we support and advocate for that. And we had, I think, 3 for Meals for the Year, but in between December and the 3rd week of January, we had like an influx of everybody wanting to come in all at the same time. We've had a lot of media articles written about us, so the more information that people have about us, the better it is. And we just pique that sort of interest so that they then come to our websites. What this really has identified is, and Mark will probably speak to that in his slides, what we have done with these companies is created about $18 million worth of advertising value for our region. So the reach, so if somebody was to go in and pay for this, that's how much they would have to pay to actually get the message across to that number of people. $750,000 is what they would pay to reach about 18 million people. And then we've delivered a few sort of job hubs and engaged with our youth in support of the workforce development areas that we speak to. So why does this matter for Gore District Council? As part of our attempt to elevate Southland as a whole, of course, Gore has some great propositions and some valuable assets that we need to showcase. And so we've got, with the increased regional visitations, we're able to build a better visit profile for Gore's economy. We've got business workforce and initiatives that strengthen your jobs and employers. We do some work in housing and emissions and energy data, so that really helps you with your decision making as you progress those sort of key items of the core deliverables that you as a council need to deliver. We also are able to demonstrate good returns on shareholder investment, especially through regional collaboration. One of the areas that we are really quite proud of is the ability to showcase Southland as a cohesive region. When we go to Wellington, when we are visited by out-of-region people, a lot of them indicate how well we coordinate together, because we've got a single plan that we all sort of speak to, especially our mayors and council staff that are in contact with our politicians. We all have the same message. That is really a strong proposition when it comes to identifying regions that can progress initiatives really well. So next up is Bobby, so I'll let the recordings play, and after her it'll be Mark, and then followed by that it'll be Steve. Steve, if you actually want to come up, you can come up. Oh, sorry. Bobby, how do I get this to... Sorry. Sound. Sorry, Jen. Right up here. Oh.
No, just then press play. No, it's not touchscreen.
Oh.
Just click with the mouse.
Sorry.
That's right.
Can you hear?
It's not playing.
No?
Oh, okay. Maybe the audio's not working.
No, that's
I
a
have to
shame.
circle back to that, sorry.
It worked last time. When Mark was here.
Yeah, we changed it.
All right. Is there anybody who can help? Sorry about that, councillors.
for regional strategy.
Thank you.
I'm really sorry I can't make it today, but I've prepared a few slides which I hope give you an update on things going on in my area.
Can you hear?
So this first slide is a snapshot of regional diversification opportunities. So we take this helicopter view so we can look at lots of different developments and happenings side by side. We look at things like when they may happen, what the workforce is that they require, where that workforce may be coming from, housing implications, as well as other stuff like water, energy, things like that. Often these things aren't looked at together, and the scale of them means that there needs to be a lot of planning if we achieve what we want to, which is that our people and businesses get as much benefit from these developments as possible. You may have heard last week that DataGrid New Zealand were successful in being granted full resource consent for their AI factory at Makarewa. This includes the subsea Trans-Tasman cable, which will connect New Zealand to many international locations. And sorry, I think my head may be over top of the map on the slide. So projects like this that are very large take a lot of time to prepare and to get to resource consent approval stage. Often they can't confirm their business planning until they know what the consent is letting them do, and that's where DataGrid are at the moment. They're reviewing how they're going to complete the project. Okay, so I believe Mayor Ben might have caught up with Fonterra late last week, and he will probably tell you what I'm telling you now. So look, the great news is that the UHT plant is on track to be completed and open in about August this year. They will employ an additional 60 to 70 new people, and this is a high value product which will target markets in Asia. Particularly important for Fonterra with the recent sale of their retail brands, but they have also told us that they're up about 5% for the year in terms of milk solids, which is actually quite impressive when you think of the wind event about October last year when production tanked. They are looking at about 340,000 tonnes of milk solids to be produced again this year, which is quite significant. So just down the road from you guys at Slopedown is Contact Energy's $1.1 billion Southland Wind Farm. So recently on the 9th of March, there was a favourable draft consent decision which came out with associated conditions, and it's important to note that the final decision won't be out till the 17th of April. This is a significant energy project for the region, and Steve will talk a little bit more about this soon, but it will have enough power to supply 150,000 households, about 300 construction jobs. But again, with new industries coming in, we have to consider the energy needs of them as well as local households. So you'll note that there will be quite a few wind projects coming up. Okay, so with all this new industry, there is going to be an impact on housing, which we've been thinking about for a few years. And so I've just got a couple of slides on that. The first slide just talks about your renting situation. So your median rent in the Gore district is $450 a week. And you'll recall that your rents have gone up quite steeply in the past couple of years, particularly from 2022 onwards. However, over the last year, they plateaued out a wee bit, even though there's still growth. This is definitely a situation of supply versus demand, thinking that there's not enough rentals in the market across the whole region and probably New Zealand, to be fair. The other point to make is that it is quite tough for a lot of people in your community to pay rent, and that's because their wages and their average household income hasn't gone up at the pace that rents have. So, you know, you only get so much money, you've got to split that across lots of expenses. Of note is that while our people are seeing it as being quite high across the border in Queenstown, of course, you're seeing rents of $800 a week, you know, so it's all relative. It's a similar situation in terms of house prices. So your average house price in the Gore district is $453,228. And this has doubled in the past 10 years, thinking that in 2016 your average house price was under $200,000. So this is still very affordable to buy a house and get on the property ladder for people that come from other parts of New Zealand. And remember, the average house price in Auckland is still over $900,000. However, for people living here, how much money they're getting through their wages, and their average household income is lower and slower. Another really important area of focus for us is to think about who our future workers are going to be that are going to power these new industries. And there's a couple of important trends. One is the ageing population and that growing portion of older folk in our community, and I know you guys understand that very well in Gore. And the second trend is around growing diversity. This diversity is being fueled by more people from overseas choosing to live in New Zealand, which is actually becoming greater than the number of people who just leave normally, whether it's to live in Australia or go to study somewhere else. So more people from overseas, creating more diversity in our communities. Every year we contact all the commercial accommodation providers in the region and we just ask how they're getting on, and we call that our audit. We've just completed the audit for 2026, and for Gore you had 21 properties that provide commercial accommodation, and they provide about 150 hotel motel rooms, 189 dorm beds and 164 campsites. So for the last year you've had a slight decrease, and it's just a slight decrease in the number of rooms. But you've also had one new provider of dorm accommodation, as well as some movement around camping grounds, which you'll know about. However, what is really impressive is your occupancy rate for your commercial accommodation, and it's very high throughout the whole year. So you sustain it, whereas in other parts of the region it dips in off-peak. So that could be due to lots of things, busyness and what's happening in industry, as well as events, which can be a key driver. Of note too is your occupancy rate has increased to just over 70% in January this year, and that was 63% in January last year. Okay, last slide from me. We are in the process of upgrading the housing dashboard on DISH, which is southlanddata.nz, our Data Insight Southland Hub. And this is a very important project because I think today you've seen the importance of housing, how we don't have enough of it, we don't have the right type of it, and for a lot of what's coming up, we need to make sure our community and our industry needs are met. So this dashboard will allow the councils in particular to get better snapshots of different parts of the housing conversation, from consents through to housing prices, sales, etc. We're hoping to have that finished by the middle of the year, all going well, and we'll keep you in the loop.
Kia ora, my name is Mark Fruit. I'm the General Manager of Tourism and Events here at Great South, and this is just an update for the last quarter of 2025. What we're looking at here, the first slide is around occupancy and guest nights, and we've seen the continuation of improved occupancy across Southland. Monthly occupancy rates have lifted across both Fiordland and the southern RTOs, and we've actually seen continued growth with international strongly, but also guest nights have maintained, which is great considering the environment that we're currently in. The growth in international spend is a standout. That's driven off the back of the international visitors returning to Fiordland and spreading out across there. But what we're also seeing is the international spend is starting to spread across quite nicely across the region. And there's a slide a bit later on that I'll put in that just shows the balancing of domestic and international spend, which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to ensure that our economic tourism portfolio is diversified enough that when one segment or market is down, we're strong enough in other markets to infill that. Domestic spending has been flat, but that's a positive for us. The domestic market around New Zealand is really tough, and we're seeing that not just in domestic leisure visitors, but also on demand for corporate visitation. International demand is lifting across the region. We've seen that. It's a continuation on from the beginning of the year, but we're starting to see stronger flows as other markets return and we get back to, I guess, what we term the pre-COVID era, and seeing those numbers returning. Once again, it's part of our strategies to ensure that we get the regional spread, and that's an area that we work on. We've obviously got opportunities to keep promoting and educating our regional experiences and events because south of Piopiotahi, our markets don't really understand us or know us. Events have been a mixed bag. Across the year, we've actually seen events continue to grow, but we're seeing fewer large-scale events. Gore's the positive and standout in the region. It continues to grow versus the wider region. We know why. We've in the last quarter of 2025, weather played a big part in events. We saw the biggest one that we have from a market perspective, the SBS Tour of Southland shift later into January due to the weather, and events are harder to keep happening. The costs of resourcing and the costs of resourcing people and volunteers is much, much harder to do. We're seeing that across New Zealand when events are actually collapsing and stopping. Business events are down, and that's a reflection of the current domestic business environment because all our business events are pretty much domestically related. But it's interesting to note we might be down in business delegates days being down, but our business delegates, the number that we're hosting is remaining positive, and what that means is we're having larger events but shorter ones, so they're not staying quite as long in market. The final slide is really just looking at our focus. We've got a challenging global outlook. We all know that, and for the next few months it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. Domestic opportunities in East Coast Australia, whilst they've always been our main focus, become more of a focus when you've got a market within New Zealand now who are probably less likely or confident to want to travel long haul. We can get them, and we want them to come back and visit Mariku, Southland. We continue to drive regional spread around our entire region. It's not just for the main centres, and look at our collaboration. And for those that are new to this group, we collaborate mainly with our wider regions that we call the Southern Way, and that's all the regions south of the Waitaki River, which incorporates 3 airports, Queenstown, Dunedin and Invercargill. So we have access to that east coast with international flights into Queenstown and Dunedin, and then we have Invercargill, which links into our largest, it's only 2-hour flight away from our largest international hub in Auckland and 1 hour from Christchurch. We will continue and push hard on training travel trade about our regional experience and events. We've got a ton of stuff that goes on in our region, and we need to keep educating and pushing that narrative across as hard as we can and as often as we can. Piopiotahi Milford is well known, and we get plenty of flow through there. The rest of our region is not well known, and we need to ensure that it gets to be well known, and that's repetition and training. Promotion and supporting events, whether that's through funding applications supporting, which we've done with Air New Zealand and the RE, the Regional Events Promotion Fund, through the likes of MIMBI, and which Gore's done very well out of in the last year. That's where we keep supporting and doing what we can to make sure that that's available. Those funds are available to be received and won over. But we also need to improve event coordination. For instance, in 2028, the Southern Field Days and the Burt Munro Challenge clash. We don't need them clashing. It's not a great opportunity. We lose opportunity. First and foremost, the economic benefit of having those 2 events, which are the region's largest, spread out over 2 weeks instead of over the same time. That means we have our hotels rooms filled longer. Our caterers work, get more work. Our volunteers who raise money through these programs, through these events, benefit more. So ensuring that they're spread rather than on top of each other ensures that our communities get the best out of what happens when these things are on. So we need to improve event coordination. And look, just to touch on is the continued development of the cruise market. 27-28 season should see a return to growth for New Zealand, and what I've got Gore in there is that we've worked pretty hard working to try and ensure that we get cruise passengers coming up on excursions. And whilst they can be a struggle with cancelled tours and cancelled cruises and things like that across the season, they do represent an opportunity. And Gore has exceptional experiences that we know they've already come in the past. We'll get feedback on how popular they are with the cruise visitors that are coming. So we just need to look at how we work that into the infrastructure that we have available. So there are our keys. Thank you for listening, and hopefully next time I'll be there in person to answer any questions that may come up. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, BB. I'm Stephen Kenny, and my role is pretty much to anticipate the barriers to growth and to enable these activities to occur before time, so that you can take advantage of that as a region, as industries in East and South. And so what I'm going to talk about today is pretty much where the rubber hits the road from East and South and Gore District's perspective, rather than run around the traps talking about all and sundry. First of all, energy strategy has underpinned a lot of the development work in Southland recently, and Great South and its predecessor organisations have been energy planning for a long period of time. And in fact, many of the things that are happening today in Gore are as a consequence of the Lower South Island Grids renewables, which we put a proposal up for in 2011. And that saw an investment of around $232 million, which was an enablement investment to increase the capacity of the lines in and out of Dunedin through to Makarua, grid exit points, two new grid exit points in Gore District, N-1, which doesn't mean anything other than the fact you've got ability to supply energy from two directions. That investment really set Gore and Environs up to have one of the best grid connectivity opportunities possible. And of course, many of the new wind projects in this part of the world are connecting in through those networks, and there are substantial new opportunities in that area. Right now we have 9 quite large wind projects in Southland. Some are in the East and Southland area. 4 of those are in the East and Southland area. One, as Bobby mentioned, is admittedly further south, but at Slope Point, that's a 400 megawatt wind farm, 55 turbines, 250 metres high on top of Slope Down. So you'll see them from Gore, and no doubt whatsoever about that. But also on the road to Owaka, on the old coach road, we'll see very large developments in that area, and over here on Hokanuis and elsewhere. But all I can say is that if you get a chance, have a look at the numbers, you'll be impressed. We had investors in from Asia 2 weeks ago, and they said anything above 5 metres a second, we invest in. We had a group in from Singapore, and they said, look, your solar resource in Southland is exceptional, which is what we knew that, but again, they invest with very low solar and very low wind. What we've done is we've mapped the entire district, every square metre, so you can actually go online and you'll see the solar radiation, the tilt angle to the sun that'll optimise your solar return, and your azimuth reading, where you position your panels to optimise that opportunity. Likewise at wind, 100 metres above the ground for the entire Gore District Council, you can look at what wind is available. You can also see how to connect into the grid. You'll see the substations, the grid exit points, and the limitations in each of those. And there's a step-by-step process go through to enable that happening. We had an event 3 weeks ago, and we had 216 registrations in Invercargill. We had good representation from Gore, very good representation from the rural farming community, who after the storms in October last year realised that resilience is fundamentally important. And we had dairy farmers reporting on their success that they had with their investments. They're getting basically a 20% return on their investment in solar, pay back their installations within 5 years. And those that reported back said, look, we milked completely for the period that we were offline during the storm event and the follow-up. So that's an important resilience model. We can do that here. We've probably got in the order of 200 solar projects underway in Southland at present. Wind and solar, just briefly touching on this, but perhaps I should. When we talk about energy, we're talking about solar energy, large-scale wind, and small-scale wind doesn't tend to work, by the way. We have 9 run-of-river baseload opportunities, not in one possibly in Southland, but 8 primarily in the Clutha system as modified river systems. The reason why that is important is that we have very large amounts of intermittent energy, sun and wind, and for New Zealand we have what's called a lightly loaded grid, and it's inherently unstable without a stabilised base load and base generation. So we think that hydro will be back on the books in the not too distant future. We also have quite large biomass opportunities, and I'll talk about that briefly, but this presents a fairly significant opportunity for Eastern Southland to convert woody residues and low-grade K-grade logs into high-value chemical-grade carbon for industrial processes and the likes. And we also have significant opportunities to capture and use biogenic methane either as a thermal energy source or as a transport energy source. Large-scale hydrogen is still being considered for Southland, although it's on the back burner at the moment, mainly because of perhaps less incentives for that to happen at the moment, but HWR Group is still pursuing their hydrogen fuels for their vehicles. But the crux of the issue is that Southland needs to more than double the amount of electricity that it has available over 15 years. Now, 135 years to get to this point, and imagine, if you will, that we're going to get to more than double what we currently have entering the networks within 15 years. That's a quantum leap on where we are. And essentially it'll come from the energy sources that we've mentioned here, but we cannot satisfy our energy needs without bringing our waste stream products like biomass, woody biomass and so on into the equation. Just as a matter of interest, we have the largest number of wood-fueled biomass boilers in the country. We have, of our 169 thermal boilers in Southland, we've now converted 210 to renewable energy. 70 of those are biomass, 40 are predominantly electrical systems, so either high temperature heat pumps or arc furnaces, and that's really stimulating the demand for energy requirements. But for an industry that's looking close to being established in Gore District, they need 95,000 tonnes of chemical grade carbon, which needs 400,000 tonnes of biomass. So there's a very big opportunity in this area for that kind of industry to be developed. Very happy to answer any questions you may have, but what I'd say is that I talked about the wind mapping earlier. This is a live map. You can switch the grid on and off. You can look at grid exit points. You can look at the capacity within each of those systems. You can look at any particular area within. Oh, sorry. Yep. You can look at it. You can look at any particular area in Gore District and find out what the wind velocity is, the wind capacity, and the exact location, and just by hovering across the particular position. You can also identify the grid exit points, the high voltage, low voltage lines, and any other relevant information to get the ball rolling in terms of your decision making or planning. All of the projects that are currently on the books have used this information from our 2023 strategy for demand side assessments, as well as the technical first pass data. So solar resources, very similar. If you go to that link there, you can look at any location, look at your house, farm, or what have you, and you'll get all of the information you need. As I mentioned, there's tremendous interest in Southland. And as of last week, believe it or not, Southland is the fastest growing solar region in the South Island at 41%. Admittedly, that's off a relatively small base, but we'll go well over 1,000 installations this year. So that presents new opportunities, but the big opportunity for farmers and for just residents alike is that this is a very actionable investment, a very quick return depending on your situation. In my case, 2.5 years, but mostly between 5 and 6 years. That's and I would say that we're seeing every day we're getting inquiries about solar opportunities and wind and renewable energy. So yeah, this is really about a precursor. It's about creating the opportunity for people to just look at their own situation and possibly make a decision one way or another if they wish to proceed. Likewise, biomass, we've mapped all of the biomass. Now, this is a very large scale map, but it looks at biomass within 100 kilometres radius from Gore. And on the outer perimeter, that area there, that's contestable, so there's 58,000 hectares of biomass within that area, or forest within that area, that will be harvested. That may not necessarily come this way to Gore, but in actual fact, there is around 180,000 hectares of forest that will come this way. The prospect for forestry, by the way, targeted forward is not that flash. And the low-grade logs, the K-grade logs, KISS-grade logs, and so on, exporters don't want them. The markets don't want them. So what we're suggesting very strongly is turn that residue into high-value fuel, biomass, exploded pellets. For those who don't know, exploded pellets are biomass fuels that have the same characteristics and calorific values as coal. So very appealing for existing large boilers like the Huntley boilers and other industrial boilers, because you can actually put them straight into the boilers and use them. So there's very significant demand here. And this is the projected biomass demand out here in the black, you see here. And this is the available biomass as it stands at present. So that's pretty much the background to that. There's a lot more detail, of course, but that has to happen quite quickly, and we're now at 220,000 tonnes of biomass. We have to move within 5 years to 580,000 tonnes. Within just over 5 years, 7 years, we're around 830,000 tonnes. So it's fairly significant, and that's without industrial carbon requirements. Just our regional emissions, the good news again is that regional emissions have gone down further. Our net emissions for the region are now down 23.6%. Again, the highest reduction in regional emissions in the country. And the reason why this is important is that we are almost entirely focused, 70% of our GDP is export focused. In order to gain access to the high value markets, these markets require what they call climate related disclosures, and in order to do that you have to have low carbon processing. That's why Fonterra, why Open Country, all of the major industrial processes are moving to low carbon processing. And it affects Gore as it does affect every other region, and the reality is that it sets exporters from this part of the world up very, very favourably in terms of market access. So did I mention that? 82% of our markets now require this. It's mandatory to get into markets. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't export, it's just that you can't export into premium markets. It'll be lower value markets, which is hard for New Zealand because we're a high cost economy. So that's why we do this kind of work. And you'll note our current GDP is 8.84 billion as a region. That's substantially ahead of where we were pre-COVID. But this year there'll be a windfall of about 3.9 billion, which is the payout from the Anchor and mainland sales from Fonterra. Now that is a windfall, won't be baked in, but it does mean that farmers in particular are looking at either paying down debt or reducing their input operational costs, and so that has a definite flow effect for Gore and the service industries. Just a little bit about commodities and stock numbers. Stock drive everything. They drive our exports, they drive our emissions and various other things. But our beef herds have increased by 19.9, 19,900 over the 2018 to 2025 period, 2024 period, I should say. We're 5,000 ahead in dairy cows in total as a region. What we did note though was when the dairy herds went down, milk production remained the same or as high as it was when the herds were much larger. That's kind of an interesting paradigm. The vets in the region and various farmers say to us, look, it's because you're not competing for feed and the animals themselves are in better shape. And I suppose it is natural when you think about that. Sheep numbers, pretty sad, 700,000 fewer sheep. However, at the Wanaka show on Saturday, the sheep farmers were saying, look, we'd never get better returns. We're even getting some returns from our wool. So, you know, we'd love to see this turn around. It's a good industry to have as part of the mix of industries that you need in any region like Southland. It's very benign in terms of soils and the like, so it's a good opportunity. But as you can see, that our exports are pretty much driven by commodity pricing. When the prices are down, people don't spend. You know, when things got tough, farmers didn't put fertiliser on. They're starting to put a little bit more on. You can only manage for a period of time without. They are getting more judicious in the way they apply fertiliser and the selection and the type. As John will tell you, you can't crop without it, but the reality is livestock farming needs that as well. So that's a little bit about that. We've spoken about the versatile soils in the Gore district. Well, if you take the area, and I'm not here to lecture, just from Chatham through say Riversdale, they are some of the best soils for cropping that you'll find, and in and around Gore district, immediately north and so on. So really what we've been looking at is the aquaculture industry. What does this mean? Could we as a region, and particularly East and Southland, contribute to the production of aquafeed when we get above 50,000 tonnes, for example, which is typically about the level of production offtake that you need to satisfy the investment in the plant and equipment. So we've gone through the crops that could contribute to this. We just had the peer review of this work back last week, and we'll be releasing this work in the coming, I think it's maybe 2 weeks, just to tidy things up and add some additional tables. But the sort of crops that we're looking at for this as an input, lucerne, but the lucerne cake. And lucerne is a wonderful cover crop, great resilience in terms of dry, drought resistance, etc. We know you can grow that here. Wheat, white lupins, usually in a sandy soil. We know plenty about yellow lupins, but white lupins are also a bit of a rocket fuel in terms of feeds. Fava beans, I was talking to Councillor Gardine earlier. The reality is that you can grow these here as well as peas and Yellowstone peas and various others. But potatoes more for the glue that they produce, the starch, to bind pellets together. Camelina is a crop that we haven't grown in Southland, but the camelina seed is a very high omega seed and very possible. The rest I won't go into, but I'll just point out, it's a funny old world. Purslane is a weed, and it turns out it's a very good weed. So you might see broadacre weeds that grow on the crack in the concrete could be broadacre crops given the right set of circumstances. We've pretty much focused on rotations and the combination of crops in our arable system. So that's all part of this work. So won't dwell too much. I've been liaising with Jason. We took on a very big piece of work for national and international companies to look at water in Southland, and as part of that work we mapped around 457 bores that run all the way right up into Gore here and up into the Waimea, and we looked at 496, but we found that was only a smaller number were actually viable for what we're looking at. And what we're looking at is the deep open shelly formations, the Chatham Formation. It's called Chatham because it was discovered north of Gore, but the Chatham Formation runs up the Waimea Plains up towards Balfour Riversdale, quite deep, down around Gore, and then straight down into the Waituna Ashes area and Awarua areas. Now, it's believed to be a connected system. It hasn't been explored, to be fair, at all in any way, shape or form. But we've been very lucky to have been provided with drill logs from previous drill activities, and we've combined that with the liquid fuels board logs and various other things to get a picture of that. So we've mapped that. What we've been pushing with government is to have this area here flown using SkyTem, which is this instrument here, which is a device that's purely optimised for identifying aquifers at depth. And while the system is around 165 metres down in some of these areas here, it's in various depths, nominally between 120 and maybe 150 metres below ground level all the way through. But what we want to do is to be able to determine with a degree of certainty that these systems are connected, and we have modelled this using leapfrog modelling to identify the volume and the flow through the system. Now we've undertaken that in our teams. This is all this work we do is from Great South, from our scientists, geologists, and so on. So that's our normal kind of routine work. And I would say, well, it's not normal routine, it's work that we do. But what I would say is that we've been working with the government to look at flying this area here from Gore down right the way here up into northern Southland and back through to this area here. This area here in Waimea was flown in 2021, and that data is now currently being analysed by GNS, or Earth Sciences New Zealand as they are now known. And we're looking at trying to have the remainder of Southland flown to really try and show where this groundwater is. Unfortunately, a lot of our surface aquifers are pretty well contaminated. They present quite a few challenges. So potable water is gold. So this is the focus of this project. We won't know how successful, if we are going to be successful, but we have been successful in getting that flown initially at no cost to ratepayers. It was part of a COVID recovery project. And that's pretty much it. If there's any questions, more than happy to answer. Yep. Yep. Joe. Yep.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, that's real informative there. I've got a few questions around the power side of things. Obviously, in Southland, we've got a good wind resource, and talking to the project manager of the wind farm out there, I think their first phase is running at about over 80% of the time. But yeah, he says it is. Yeah. and knowing some of the other parties that are now looking around the district too at these different sites. But looking at the level of investment we're putting into wind, wind is not a base load. And why are we not putting that into something like a binary cycle geothermal down here where we get base load? And then some of that investment also into battery storage, because obviously we've got the N-1 substation here in Gore that we could be looking at spending, well, attract a partner that's going to spend $250 million to put batteries in there, so we can become that that safety net for when that base load isn't there. What else have I got on my list? Yeah, and the other thing is too is your wind doesn't provide grid inertia, which is obviously, for those that don't know, is you said you've got some run-of-the-river water systems, hydro going in.
What we've done is identify
The sites for it.
could put this like Dunbarton Rock and various other places that have previously been looked at. Beaumont and Tuapeka Mouthhead and the likes, but you know, the Hawea Wanaka tunnel, the downstream from the Hawea control structure, you might say, what's that got to do with South Enduro Otago? Well, any energy that's taken off the head and then fed into another network frees up more energy for the south, which is critical.
Yeah, but your grid inertia, you don't get that from wind, you don't get that from solar. That's the only thing that hydro, geothermal, nuclear can provide through the old steam-based system or inertia.
Comes from base load or big stable loads. That's one thing that people don't understand about Tiwai Smelter. There's a lot of focus on 10-15% of New Zealand's total energy use, but the only way to create stable grid is base generation, base load, or inertia devices. And inertia devices just rotate and don't produce anything. So, yeah, I mean, that's all part of the work. Yeah, we've studied that in absolute detail. Yep. So good point, Joe. Yep. As far as geothermal goes, you've got to go down quite a long way to get the type of geothermal temperatures that, in this part of the world anyway, that would support that investment. It's also a very high capital investment. Yeah. Yep. So, quite right about the other points for sure. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Sorry, John. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Chatham Rise water. We're looking for low nitrate water in Gore, and we have drilled down to about sort of 170, 180 metres, I think, on the riverbed near the river, but we haven't struck it. But is there any sort of thinking of programming more research into that, or is it sort of money's dried up and that sort of?
You're quite right. I guess the whole purpose of putting up this project to government is to try and get a lot more investigation in this water resource, particularly the Chatham. It narrows up through this area here, and while it looks broad and reasonably expansive further south, we believe there is a pathway through from the Waimea. Once that airborne survey in the Waimea is flown, it's going to give greater insight. So the ideal would be to have more precision through non-invasive airborne survey, so that if you come to drill, you can drill. But one of the really important things is when you have perched aquifers and you have deep, more or less pure aquifers, you can't just simply pepper the formation with bores, because they become a vector for contamination. So you want to protect that. You have to have very good, well-sealed bore systems. Strangely enough, when you get to this coloured here, you've been around for a while. So I can tell you the East Gore reservoir was one that I developed at TH Jenkins and Associates back in the 70s, and that was a pure water resource. It was probably pumped to about 10 times its maximum drawdown, and replenishment rates were very rapid. But it just goes to show when you allocate a lot of water, possibly over allocate water below a certain level, it has a very distinct and significant impact on water resource. So, yeah, I'd say the next piece of work is probably very important. We're trying to get this done with nominal cost to council. We did come and talk about it some years ago, but there wasn't an appetite to tackle it at that stage. But as it turns out, we've been able to do all of this work paid for by external commissions, and they've just allowed us to release the information for council use. So that's a win. Yep.
Sorry, Steve, that's a really interesting point that you've made when I think about the nitrate issue that we're experiencing over in Coop as well. I don't know whether the ES has explored that as an alternative. Obviously, agriculture has been the main cause in terms of excreting those nitrates, but I don't think it's been looked at in terms of the reduction of flow through those aquifers that actually reduces the nitrate content because there's more water flowing through it. Is that something that you're suggesting could be a cause of it, if actually there's less water running through those aquifers nowadays compared to when there was back in the past?
This all has an effect. You know, you've got mixing. Obviously, if you've got less volume of water, then the mixing is low. It doesn't necessarily resolve the problem, but it does resolve the effect of the problem. And nitrates are not desirable in any drinking water system, end of story. There are other environmental factors like, for example, increased evapotranspiration through forest plantings. They significantly reduce the amount of water in the system for a start, so all of these factors. But I would say that it's point source allocation that's probably the major problem at this point. But again, this work here provides great insights into not only where water may be available, but what natural replenishment will occur through the system. So watch this space. We'll keep you posted, and hopefully we can provide some more insights to help you in the long term. Yeah. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Steve. Just while you're flying that, are you going to do any other analysis, geomagnetic, for minerals and that around the region as well? Because you're doing the past, you might as well do that at the same time.
Well, the good news, the good news is that that's aeromagnetics, but it's a very precision instrument out of Copenhagen, and that is kind of the global de facto standard now. We have actually undertaken radiometrics and aeromagnetics also, but that's targeting the containment structures under the ground. The aeromagnetics, however, is the radiometrics is gamma ray. So we use gamma ray to identify minerals in the soil, including the XRF, so nutrient at depth. It only is like an X-ray of the upper surfaces of the soil horizon. But while I can't necessarily talk about this too much, we have made some fairly significant discoveries through that in the Lower South Island and including Gore District. So in the fullness of time, we may see some rare earth mineral or rare earth mineral developments in this part of the world, in areas where there aren't necessarily highly productive activities here. Because irrespective of the way we look at these things, very rarely are extractive industries going to outstrip productive industries. I think it's 7-1 actually for productive industries here. Yep. So, but you know, sometimes they can coexist and reap significant benefits. Yep. Yep. That we have all that stuff loaded into our systems, into our ArcGIS and all our spatial systems, including all of this stuff. So it's pretty easy to use once you've got it in that form. Yeah. the only limitation for us is when we do commissions for other parties, we have to make ends meet to survive. So they pay us to do that. That's their work. Mostly we try and negotiate a term at which time this material becomes available. So I don't think there's any particular limitation on that. All I'd say is that sometimes with the data and the use of the data, particularly aeromagnetics and radiometrics, you just can't pick up a file and then automatically use it. We do spend quite a bit of time training people to use that information, yeah. So.
Thank you, Steve. That's fantastic, and thank you, Chami, for that presentation. Are you taking questions on the rest of the presentation as well? Absolutely. Just a question around the Burt Munro versus the field days and improving event coordination. Does Mark have any ideas of how he's going to do that? Because Burt Munro, I believe, is based around an anniversary, and field days doesn't change their event, and I don't imagine they would, considering they're the bigger event. What's the thinking behind that, and is it a good use of time?
If we have both occurring at the same time, we would lose a significant amount of economic impact to the region, including for Gore, because our visitors to Burt Munro obviously go all around. Right now, we've had discussions with both parties, and both parties are pretty much holding fast. So I think it is important for us to try and take this conversation to a certain extent because of being able to spread it out across. So instead of, everybody being there for 1 week, we want them to be there over 2 weeks. So 1 week for Burt Munro and 1 week for Southern Field Days. And otherwise, we're not going to get that whole value, Ben.
Yeah, I guess I just questioned the value. I understand the theory, I guess the value in actually proceeding with that work, because even if you move it a week, then you bump into whole different events. I mean, AMP show in Gore has the same conflicts with field days. If they always suffer a year that field days is on. If you move it a week, then you're running into Moonshine Trail and other. So like February's a packed month anyway. I struggle to see how moving those events is really going to help unless you move Burt Munro or field days to a completely different month. And then you've got other challenges with weather and things as well. So, yeah. Good luck to you, I guess, is probably yeah.
Burt Munro shifted because of the weather. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? It's probably one of the questions I've asked several times. How's the progress on the old briquette factory going, Steve? The briquette factory in Mataura, the next one?
Briquette plant was, as we know, unfortunately, was an unmitigated disaster. $36 million invested and very few briquettes through it. So, and I guess if you're using that for using a lignite product, I mean, apart from the obvious challenges at the moment around fossil fuels, it was using a highly reactive lignite, and it spontaneously combusts as soon as you dry it. So, I guess that as an aside, the biomass fuels project that I described there has a very real possibility of being able to utilise some of the residuals on that site if it was available and commercially able to be developed. There's a 110 volt power supply straight across to the medium density fibreboard plant and a grid exit point. So you've got all of the right infrastructure close to rail and close to highways. So it's a good location. There are some question marks over potentially whether that land is floodable, but with all of these things you need to anticipate that before any development occurs. But yes, that's very much part of the picture, if you like. Yeah, so that circle that I showed you is dead smack in the middle of the briquette, or just slightly to the east of the briquette plant. Yep. That's exactly where it stands. I'd like to think it was happening quickly, but you know how it is.
Any last questions for the team here? Otherwise, we'll roll into district plan stuff. Appears not to be. Thank you very much for taking the time. We really appreciate hearing from you. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, councillors.
Dave and Morgan, the hot seat is all yours.
Good afternoon, councillors. Thanks for having us. We thought we'd just take this opportunity to run through a bit about the appeal process, which will be coming. There'll be some discussions on moving forward, but we've sort of tailored this specific to the process at this point. So this is a slide from the previous workshop that we did with you. On the district plan, so just recapping, where are we at now? So decisions were released, the appeal period has officially closed yesterday with the Environment Court. So we're just waiting at the moment for all the appeals to come through to us. And now we're entering into what's known as the Section 274 parties to an appeal period. So that's when any party who was a submitter can join in on the appeal, on an appeal that's been lodged. So we'll talk about that in a wee bit more detail. And then we flagged that the earliest we could come back to a council meeting would be April, but depending on scale and nature of appeals, so probably still trying to work towards that April date to come back to council with a bit of a position paper. But probably could possibly be May, depending on the nature of the work involved. So what we'll be doing, we'll come back, we'll look at the decisions and we'll look at the plan and provide a bit of a paper for the elected members around possible appeal matters and potential for mediations. So again, this was just a slide from our workshop last time, so just recapping where we are. So we're still currently operating under both plans, even though that appeal period has closed, and we are until the council formally adopts the new plan. So where appeals are received, we won't be able to adopt plan provisions which relate to an appeal matter until that appeal has been resolved. Which means in that time there is still those additional consenting complexities while we're in that transitional phase, where we have to make assessments on building consents and resource consents and applications under both plans. And then we will come back with that update, which is sort of where we're at, not quite at that update stage, but we're just sort of running through what is the process, so there's a good understanding of that side of it and where to from here. So, the Environment Court appeals process. So, essentially the appeal process on a plan is where submitters can appeal the council's decision to the Environment Court. If an appeal is filed, then submitters can join an appeal under Section 274. We then have to go through and determine the scope and nature of those appeals, and then could be, or usually is, the opportunity for mediation on appeal matters. If mediation is not achieved or is not agreed to, then the Environment Court would hear the appeal and the Environment Court would then determine the appeal. There can be appeal rights on an Environment Court decision, and that's genuinely through to the High Court, but they do have to be on matters of law rather than the content as such. So for the appeal process, so who can become a Section 274 party? So the people that can become an appeal to the party would be the Minister for the Environment, a local authority, a person who has an interest in proceedings that are greater than the public genuinely, or a person who made a submission on that matter. So just because you've made a submission on the plan, that your submission had to be relevant to that specific appeal matter. So what we're currently doing at the moment as a planning team, so we're currently reviewing, grouping and prioritising appeal matters. To date, we have received 6 appeals, and they're on a range of matters topics. We haven't had a chance to read through them all, or haven't had confirmation from the Environment Court that any additional matters have been raised. So it's probably good to note that we've sort of at the start of where we've come in the process, we're sort of entering into that funnel now where at the start we had, I think it was 130 submitters plus 26 further submissions, which the submissions raised over 5,000 submission points. Further submissions were about maybe just under 1,500 submission points. So now we're just down to sort of looking at that bottom of that funnel, I suppose, where we've got the 6 appeal matters, 6 appeal parties, potentially, could be a couple more that are late to come through. And then those scope of those appeals become very narrow just to specific matters. So I think that sort of recognises the process that the plan's been through, that we're sort of getting to that end now, where we really understand what the potential tensions are with those decisions. So what we're doing as a team as well is we're identifying parts of the plan subject to an appeal, and identifying that in the E-plan. So we'll go through all those appeals and we'll start to identify exactly so plan users and the community can understand which rules are subject to an appeal. That can sometimes be quite an exhaustive process if the scope of the appeal. So we'll also sort of been looking at, okay, what is the scope of these appeals and potentially clarifying matters with appellant parties as well. We'll also be looking at the current operative district plan and looking at provisions that are no longer treated as operative in terms of consent processing and decision making, and going through and identifying that as well in the old district plan. So there's a few steps there. What we're also doing is we'll start to undertake a technical review of all the planning matters. We will have to sort of wait until that Section 274 party process has ended, because there could be some additional considerations with the 274 parties. It's sort of us going through with a sort of a first look, okay, what's being said, is there a plan, like is there a way we can address that, or from a planning lens, is there, is there credit in what's being said here? Just really looking at it very impartially. And then what we will do is we'll come back and we'll, with a position paper to council to understand and give direction on, what are the mediation options, what's the potential agenda for that, what might be council in a position to agree or support, what provisions of the district plan could become operative fully as well. So that will be what comes back to council as the next step. So in terms of the appeal process with our legal team. So our legal team are currently collating and ensuring we've received all the appeals. The courts have been quite proactive. Oh, sorry. The legal team, the Environment Court's actually already been very proactive at sending a few through. We haven't identified any we haven't received yet. The legal team are also acting as the point of liaison with the Environment Court and the appellants. They also will be assisting in confirming what are the scope of the appeals, and they'll assist us with that, preparing a direction report and a report for the courts on how we propose to manage appeal from that direction paper we bring to the council. So the courts might say, there's these matters that need, which ones do you think you want to prioritise? They might be ones that are a little bit more straightforward or grouped together. How do you want to address these just in terms of efficiency? With that. So, Environment Court mediations. So, the Environment Court provides, sorry, I'm getting distracted, forgetting to turn. The Environment Court provides a mediation service which essentially encourages people, where appropriate, to settle their dispute out of court. All appeals, when lodged, are seen and assessed by the environment judge, but almost all appeals will always be referred to a commissioner for mediation to be arranged. It would be quite rare for the judge to determine mediation couldn't occur. If an appeal is referred to mediation, the court will advise the parties of that, and they will be the ones arranging the mediation. And the mediation takes place, it will be facilitated by one of the Environment Court commissioners. The date of mediation is set by the commissioner's availability, not ours, so we will have to work in around with the courts on this matter. And they will provide at least 15 working days of when that mediation is to take place, and it would take place at a venue neutral to all parties. So we anticipate we should be able to have these discussions locally or online in terms of efficiencies. The courts are in the process at the moment of just confirming with the appellants that they are all open to mediation as well. So the courts are sort of already underway with that step. And just understanding mediations. And mediations on plan for provisions do tend to be quite fluid. So when we get into that setting, there can be a number of ways to actually achieve the position of council. So we just have to be conscious if we get a direction from council on a matter, we do have to have a little bit of be quite fluid with that, so that we can, it might not just be this is the position, or we'll change this rule, or we'll change that policy or objective. We have to sort of work with all the parties that are involved in that process. And there could be a number of ways to achieve the outcome that they want to see, or we might be able to move or shift as long as we sort of are achieving that general position of what the council's directing. It's not always easy to predetermine which appeals may be mediated to a resolution and which things will be won't be able to be agreed upon with all the parties and may end up in court. Some parties may say, no, we're holding a really firm line. This is the only thing we will agree to. But we will try really hard to understand that and discuss with parties and work through that. And so there may be regular reassessments, so we might have to come back to council again, and potentially revise the direction that council have initially given. So just understanding that fluid nature there. So in terms of Environment Court hearing process, I haven't gone into too much detail because it's not where any of us would like to be, but essentially if mediations are unable to be undertaken or are not successful, the matter would be considered by the courts through a hearing process, and those decision making is then made by the courts. If the court does consider that there's an appeal provisions that need amending, they can come back to us to redraft that provision on their behalf, and we do then have to redraft that in consultation with all the so the appellant or any Section 274 parties, and submit that back to the courts for confirmation, so it can become a bit of back and forward at that stage. So just a few considerations. The appeal process is managed by the courts, and it is quite a highly regulated process. Any decisions made by council need to be based on the merits of the appeal only and not predetermined. So that's what a lot of the legal team will be assisting us with. Is this within scope? We can't just sort of try come up with something entirely new or different. It does have to be in scope with the process that it's been through. We need to ensure that there are robust processes in place to ensure we are meeting our legal responsibilities. Any discussions on specific appeal matters are required to be confidential, including those mediation discussions. So after this point, anything we discuss will have to be in sort of a publicly excluded setting, and those conversations do have to stay confidential, and that's in the interest of all parties involved in the process as well, and being fair to them. We need to respect the court processes, and we do not want to find ourselves or anyone to be put in a position of being in contempt of the courts, intentionally or unintentionally. And that's why we've got the legal team supporting us to make sure that doesn't happen. And any costs associated with an appeal process may be awarded by the courts to any party of the proceedings to compensate for unnecessary costs incurred as a result of the action of the other party. So if a classic example of that is if one party is really willing to mediate and one party isn't, the courts will look at that and see that one party's being quite unreasonable, and they may award costs in favour of the party that is trying to get a resolve. So yeah, just something to be conscious of.
So we have to be very careful not to express any opinions.
Yes, essentially, yeah. Yeah. So conflicts of interest, so it's important that we manage conflicts of interest carefully. Thanks, Dave. I'll give it to you.
I'll change it when you change yours.
I'm getting lost. So we'll look to circulate a conflict of interest register with the elected members and get advice from our legal team if there are any conflicts which may be required to be managed or avoided, especially if it comes to making decisions on matters. It wouldn't necessarily preclude you from being involved, or preclude you from hearing conversations, but maybe the decision-making side of it, if there was any potential conflict. So just try to think of what conflicts could arise. It could be if you've made comments, communications, or perceptions of having a predetermined position on an appeal matter. You could be a member, employee, supporter of one of the groups or organisations that have lodged an appeal. You could have had a direct involvement already in an appeal matter, so that could be something like you've reviewed it, you've assisted with the lodging of it, you might be funding it through your own or a business venture, or having a vested business or personal interest in a matter that is subject to appeal or with an appellant. Depending on the conflict of interest, we'll just need to have consideration on that participation. And it may just be that it's certain topics or certain appeal matters that you wouldn't be able to participate in, not everything. So if there's something that's completely irrelevant to a potential conflict, you can still participate in those discussions and decisions. And so what we'll do is we'll always seek advice from our legal team around any potential conflicts of interest. So if you do have concerns or you want to understand what that means, we're happy to take that on board and take that back to the team and get some direction sooner rather than later.
Can we explore with that list of conflicts of interest for matters that have already been in the public arena? Not having enough for a quorum, so we need 6 or more for a quorum, and whether we'd have to put standing orders to the side to make some of those decisions. So can we just explore what that looks like?
Yeah, so Morgan's talking in general terms here. We're not going to talk about any specifics today. We're not going to talk about any specific appeals, any specific organisations. But obviously, some of those potential conflicts will apply to some of you because you'll be members of large organisations that may be active on social media, for example. Yep, we're talking to our lawyers already about how to interpret that. But as Morgan says, being a member of a huge organisation doesn't necessarily mean a conflict. Obviously, if you've helped that organisation draft the appeal, if you've been on social media and commented or liked or shared their information that they're going to appeal, or that you've indicated publicly that you agree with their appeal, that would potentially be a conflict that you would need to stand back from. But we'll deal with that on a case-by-case basis once we get into the actual appeals. Today we're just keeping it really, really general. We're not talking about any specifics today.
But we can definitely take that back to the legal team as well to make sure there's any concerns around that. So communication, so we just wanted to sort of flag, considering we're now into that legal process, that we just need to ensure any communications do not discuss the specifics of an appeal matter. So, you can focus comms around the process, but not the content or what the position of counsel may be. So it'd be okay to say the decision's with the court now, but you couldn't then say, and I hope the court rules in favour of X, Y, Z. It's just keeping to the facts of the process is okay. And if you're ever not sure, we can run that through the legal team as well to make sure if you're wanting to articulate a point, just to protect yourselves and not exclude yourself from being able to make decisions from a simple slip-up.
If you do make a simple slip-up as an individual, are you liable for any legal?
Well, I think I did raise around being in contempt of the court. So you wouldn't want to end up in a position where you're telling the judge or the courts what decision they should make, and that could be perceived as being in contempt of court, and that does carry liability. So that's why we're sort of trying to flag carefully here to everyone that it's in quite a serious process now.
I'm referring to myself a little bit because I've got to be so bloody careful.
Yeah, just if in doubt, check in with us, but just really keep in your mind process only, not content, and it should be a good thing to keep in your mind at this point.
I've got a little left field one. I can understand all that. So it comes in there and a decision is made and say some part of the plan has changed. Now the previous submitters don't like that change. Can they then appeal that change? Because they're happy with what's in there already. It then gets changed on them. So they can't make.
Yeah, so that's why is the importance of that 274 party. So if you want to participate in those discussions moving forward, you do have to become a party to that appeal. So at the moment, the appellants are all serving or are required to serve notice on all the submitters on the provisions that they have appealed. So we're just going through and making sure, and the courts are going through and making sure that everyone's done what they're required to do. So they've got 5 working days to do that. So that should still give you 10 working days if you have a really strong vested interest in something. But there is a requirement to tell submitters on those provisions that you're appealing, so they have that opportunity to participate.
I understand that, but I'm not appealing it. I'm happy with what's in the plan already. It's been appealed by somebody. Do I then come a part of that 274? Does everybody else, do I get advised that it's been appealed?
Can I ask a question around, okay, this has already been through commissioners. Now, as a commissioner, your process is taking those parties to mediation to find the common ground and come to a solution. So, technically, in all respects, we should not be getting to the stage where we need to go through mediation again and then go through to court. So, do we have any comeback on those commissioners saying, actually, you haven't done your job right, we're going to withhold your final payment or something like that? Because literally, the process you're going through there is already what we do as commissioners. We have to sit there at the table and go, this is position A, position B, cool. You agree on A, B, C. You don't agree on the rest on the page. How about we thrash it out, like whether hot tubbing or you get into different rooms and nut it out. And at the end of the day, you're meant to come to that agreement.
I guess it's the court process, but I think that's the point of that mediation, and that's why I sort of flagged around cost. We've all got to show we're being proactive, but that's that technical review we'll do as well, so making sure there's things within scope as well. That's the challenging thing as well. There's yeah, and so I think it's just sort of encouraging all parties need to go in and be really willing to participate in that discussion, and listen, and we can. It's yeah.
It's gone. I'll wind it up in a minute. I just forgot what I was going to say, because we were told during the submissions and everything else that a lot of the plan is threaded together right throughout the whole plan. So you change part A over here, part B, C, D, and that right through the whole thing, and it's got to trigger heaps of things. How do you work that?
So that's why we're going to be working very hard at the moment to really try and understand what is the scope of any of the, if there's an appeal that's very wide-natured, what does that actually mean? And we will spend quite a bit of time, I think, in going and trying to really focus with the appellants. Okay, what do you actually mean? What are the issues actually in contention here? So we can narrow that scope, and we will, and the court will encourage it, and we, our legal team, will, and we will all be trying to narrow that scope as much as we can. So before we even get into a mediation discussion, we're really clear what is the matters and what is the impacts of that through the rest of the plan. So that's sort of that technical review step that I talked about.
One more piece. So look, that threads back to what Joe was saying, that the commissioners should have cut that off at the pass, perhaps, a wee bit, because the cost is what I'm thinking now. You know, when we go down the track, we're going to have another couple of $1 million of.
It's still their legal right, though.
No, I hear that. I hear that.
So the idea is that we sort of rule out during the hearing and submission phase, but that submitter could then turn around and think a week later and go, actually, no, I don't agree with what I agreed to in the hearing. It's still got the legal.
No, I hear that. Yeah, yeah, cool.
Thank you, Morgan. That's been a good explanation, but I'm a wee bit with Paul McPhail around the cost. Like, so far, this has cost $6.5 million to get to this point, and I've heard you mention the legal team a number of times. Like, have we got a projected cost, or is there some sort of budget in mind that you guys are working on so that we know what we're expecting to come to?
So just in defence of the commissioners, I guess, appeals are really common when a district plan comes out. I was expecting double figures. That would certainly be what you would typically get. Morgan and I had a little bet on how many there would be. Morgan won that bet because she's smarter than me. We've not had many appeals, and appeals, as you kind of indicated, can take many forms. They can be really quite minor. Move this line a few metres, or they could be quite major. There'll be some additional costs to go through legal things, but I've certainly seen district plan where the appeals process runs for years and the costs of it runs into millions. We're not expecting that here. We're certainly not expecting anything close to $1 million more to come for legal. I would hope it's quite some way under that, and not, what are you thinking, kind of 6 to 12 months of an appeal process?
Yeah, I did raise that question with the lawyers yesterday, just to sort of in anticipation of that potential question. It's really hard to work out how willing the parties are going to be, but I think if 5 appeals, we were sort of talking about if there was 5 appeals, it may end up being maybe 100 to 200,000 for all of those appeals through to probably 100, 150,000 through to if we could get it resolved through mediation. So we are in that same process asking those questions of the legal team. In your experience, how much will this cost us? So we can do some budget planning as well. But yeah, they've just come out of a few similar appeals in other district plans, and that was sort of and that was including our sort of planning staff time, as well as that's not just the lawyers. It was sort of the whole process for council to go through just to a agreed mediation point. Again, we've got to check the scope of the appeals to check if something might need like a technical expert or technical evidence, and that might be where the costs may start to increase, and that's why we're trying to do that exercise quite quickly so we can start to put some plans in place.
Oh, sorry, just to follow up on that, are we privy to know who is all appealing from, like, once you guys get the finalised list, are the councillors told straight up this, of who's done it? And yep.
Everyone, it will be public knowledge, so we'll be putting all the appeals on our website as soon as we've received everything. We're just trying to collate them, and we really haven't had a chance to read them all properly yet either, and make sure we've actually got them all. So we don't want to put them up if there's someone missing as well. So just trying to really chase the courts to make sure. And the courts actually can accept late appeals, so we really need to double check that that's not, if that's happening, that it's relatively quick.
Where was I going with that? How long is this district plan going to be operative before we go and start on the new one? Well, I'm working out roughly spending about 800,000 a year on a district plan, regardless of whether we're working on it or not. So roughly 3%, 3.5% of our rates every year are going into the district plan.
So the actual commissioners, are they part of the group that is also brought in? Are they're done now, nothing more? Okay, because wouldn't their rationale be required?
That's that technical review we'll do as a planning staff. We'll go back through and read their decisions. That's what everyone's doing at the moment, looking at their justifications. That's the importance of, I think was it like 800 pages of decisions or something? They've tried to be really thorough in giving us their reasoning, and it's important, we have to actually account for all that to understand if appeals are even in the scope of being able to be appealed, because if there's appeals that aren't even in the scope here, we'll try to get that addressed relatively promptly as well before we spend too much time on them.
And the trouble we've had this last couple of weeks with information that's been in the press and with some of our political leaders has been incorrect. And we're sort of bound by, we can't say a damn thing.
Yeah, so we're sort of trying to work on some solutions for that in the interim as well, and we've sort of run them through the legal team. There could be the option for us to try, once we've got all the appeals and seen who all the parties are, and that's on my list to do, is maybe we could get some practice notes about how we're managing consents in this time. So looking at what the appeals are, how we'll be managing those consents, but also just how we're applying consents. So it's not, it's a possible way to assist with that as well. So yeah, we're working on that as well.
I guess the difference up till now is that there hasn't been appeals, and now there is, and they're on the table. So I would say that first line, the decisions now with the courts, is probably the byline that all of us, myself included, need to stick to from now on. It's largely out of our hands. Yeah.
Sorry. So just for clarification, our mayor done a podcast last week. So does that mean that he's got a conflict of interest because of the stuff that he spoke about on the podcast, or is it from the day that the appeals closed?
It could possibly be a conflict. That's the thing we'll run through, and we'll get some advice around that as well. So it's the importance of anything we're talking about is just keeping it to process, because you just got to be so careful what you say in a public space that someone may perceive you. That means you've formed an opinion or predetermined an outcome on something. So yeah, just because you've said something doesn't mean it is going to exclude you. That's what we'll just be checking with things, just to make sure we're not disrespecting the courts. We don't want anyone to be perceived to be conflicted here, just to be fair to all parties.
Any other questions for Morgan? Yeah, we're obviously very aware that there is misinformation circulating in the community, and we'll do our best to correct that as soon as we can without overstepping.
Just, do we have a bit of a timeline when councillors will receive, firstly, the appeals, and then secondly, the opportunity to input into a conflicts of interest register?
Yeah, I'm hoping we'll be able to get the appeals circulated later this week once we've had confirmation. And then the conflict of interest register, yeah, we should hope we'll be able to do that in the next week or two, just resourcing. It's a challenge. And I think there was a question someone raised, I don't know if I actually answered it, and it was around how long will this process drag out? And in a realistic word, that's why we're trying to get this back to the April meeting, because we could potentially be in mediations in May, even if the courts had availability. So we're really conscious of the challenge for the community. Or there might be things even within the appeals that, you know, we could pretty much get a court order to sign off without having to go to an appeal if it's just a really simple, straightforward point matter. So that could resolve that really quickly. So yeah, we'll be looking for any opportunity we can to get things resolved as quick as we can. But if you ended up in like a hearing process, I think realistically you'd be looking at more like a 6 to 9 month time period with court availability. But possibly with mediation, we might just be looking at maybe a 6-month process. So that would be an ideal world. But obviously we're in the hands of the courts to set timing.
Any other questions for Morgan? All right. Thanks very much for your time then, folks. I do have 2 more things for councillors once the public have left the room, though.